Hi there, my name is Austin, and welcome to the Ypsilanti Historical Society. Today, I will be taking you on a 360 video tour of the Ypsilanti Historical Museum. Throughout the tour, if you see that there is any objects you might want to get a closer look at, we do have a LiDAR scan completed. I will put the link in the description of the video for you to enjoy. The LiDAR scan has over 90 scan points of different locations throughout the museum, so you can get different high-quality images of different areas throughout the entire museum of the first and the second floor. This tour will last roughly about 35 minutes, but if you don't want to stay for the whole thing, there will be timestamps in the video that will take you to individual rooms. Let's begin with the history of the site. The house was built in 1860 by a banker named Asa. Him and his wife Minerva lived here for about 4 years until Minerva suddenly passed away. For the next 60 years, two other families ended up living in this house, and then in 1922, a Miss Ross would end up buying this house and convert it into 6 or 7 different apartments. During that time, she ended up installing different false walls, false ceilings, added different plumbing throughout the house. In 1968, the city actually bought this house and the others around it with plans to have it demolished to build a strip mall. However, that thankfully never happened. It would be later, in 1969, that volunteers would begin renovating this place to open it up as a museum, and that would successfully happen in the year 1972. Today, the Ypsilanti Historical Society owns and operates out of this building. Welcome to the formal parlor, which is our first room on our tour today. This room is typically the fanciest room in the house, and that's because it was really only used to entertain guests or host special events. Children also typically were not allowed in this room. Over here, we have this stunning bay window. Now, the technology for bay windows were just becoming a thing when this house was built in 1860, so it was very expensive to add into this room. If you look above us, around the room, there's beautiful cornices and colored stenciling. Now, this is all original to the house, and there are other rooms on the first floor that have similar detailing and paintings. Now, when this house was converted into apartments in the 1920s, they installed drop ceilings to every room on the first floor to help conserve heat. Then when it became a museum in the 1970s, they removed those drop ceilings and discovered all of this hidden away. Also on the first floor are 4 of these fireplaces. Now, these are all coal fireplaces, and this one unfortunately has been bricked up, but the other ones have not been. Now, despite their marble-looking appearance, they are actually wood and stone, compressed together, and then just painted to look like marble. Above the fireplace here, we have Winfried Watling. She was a 14-year-old girl here in Ypsilanti that died of pneumonia. She was the daughter of Dr. and Mrs. John Watling. Over here, we have a Steinway & Sons grand piano. Now, this is a square grand piano compared to your typical concert grand piano. Now, the main difference is the fact that this square grand piano goes horizontal, where a concert grand goes vertical. And for that reason, it's actually very hard to keep this particular piano in tune. Now behind me, this is Rosina Norris. And she was actually a female activist here in Ypsilanti in the 1820s, and she was also an active school teacher. And this is her husband over here, Mark Norris. Mark was actually the first trustee in Ypsilanti, also 1820s. Over this way, this is their son, Lyman Norris. Now, Lyman was actually one of the first people to graduate from University of Michigan Law School in 1841. He is also very famous for participating in the Dred Scott Supreme Court case. Welcome to the dining room. This room is directly connected to the formal parlor, which is right behind me. And that's for if you were entertaining guests and stuff like that, hosting a special event of some sort, and you didn't want to be interrupted by the children, you could move from one room to the other without being disturbed. Now over here, we have a bunch of different silver, and if you look on the table too, we have very beautiful salt and pepper shakers and vinegar holders, stuff like that, all in silver as well. Now on the wall over there, we have a portrait of Carlista Davis, who is one of the wives of a mayor here in Ypsilanti. Now what is so interesting about this particular portrait was this portrait was done in 1875 from a photograph taken in 1869. And it was used from putting up the picture into a projector and then projecting it onto a canvas. And this was done shortly after she passed. We also, in this room, have another fireplace, as mentioned before. And then we have more silver and china around the room. Welcome to the kitchen. This room was actually an add-on to the house sometime after it became apartments. That's why when you look around this room here, you can see the exposed brick. Now a few things that is interesting in this particular room, right here is an industrial butter churner, which is actually probably one of my favorite things in this entire museum. And simply for the fact that you could either hand crank it, as you can see on this side, or if you had a Model T or some kind of engine or something to hook up a belt to, you could actually attach it to this side over here and it'd churn your butter for you. We also, right here, have a little medicine cabinet. And then, right over here, we have an old hand crank telephone. Another thing that is actually really cool and unique is this pie safe, which were actually rather popular back in the day. Now pie safes would typically sit onto a porch of some sorts, and you can see here, you can actually lock it and it'd stay shut here. It has a wonderful screen on all four sides of the pie safe to help keep insects from getting into the pies while also allowing them to ventilate. And the locks were mostly used so neighborhood children couldn't come up and steal your pies. Now over here, we have a dry sink. Now, because there was no running water in the 1860s, a house like this had to use a dry sink. So water would be brought in to wash things here, and then if you were inside for whatever reason, you could take the water and just throw it out the window, or if you were outside, just throw it out onto the lawn for disposal. There's no drain on here, so that's why they had to dispose it like that. Now further down in the kitchen, we actually have a little spice cabinet here. And if you look really closely, you can actually see a lot of the spices are actually still used today. Then right here, we have a Kalamazoo Emperor stove. Now, when the society actually first got it donated to them, it looked very rusticated, like this. And part of the reason for that was because it was sitting in a barn here in Ypsilanti for a good 60, 70 years. So the society ended up getting it restored. And as you can see, it's got a beautiful blue finish on it. And it's actually a wood-burning stove, but this compartment over here was actually used to heat water. So you could have hot water while you were cooking. Over here in this corner, we have a washing machine. Now this is actually a high-tech, state-of-the-art washing machine. It's actually on a comeback in modern days. It's a hand crank washing machine, and it actually has a wringer to help wring out your clothes. Sometimes wringers would get the nickname of a mangler because it would end up, mashing your finger while you're trying to get it through. Over here, we have an icebox. An icebox like this was typically used to help store ice here in Ypsilanti before refrigerators became popular. People here in Ypsilanti got their ice from the Huron River. And we'll actually show you a photograph here of ice blocks going up a conveyor belt. Now, you could end up getting ice either 25, 50 pounds, or on the other side, there's a 75 or 100 pound option. And they would bring it directly into your ice box for you. Yeah, they would take ice tongs like this and shove it in here. Now over here, on this far side, is actually some wonderful silver and china from the Henry Ford estate located in Dearborn. Welcome to the Ypsi room, also known as the admin's room. In the middle here, we have various different Native American artifacts on both sides of the case. So as we go around the room, make sure you take a look at some of the different artifacts that we have on display. To my right, we have two different war heroes here, both native to Ypsilanti. On my far side here, this is Captain Carl Arvin. Now Arvin was an Ypsilanti native. He won numerous awards at the Ypsilanti High School. He actually ended up going to West Point to become a military officer in the Army, and he ended up going to Vietnam. Unfortunately, he lost his life in combat and received the Purple Heart. The community here was heart-stricken, but he will forever be remembered here at the Ypsilanti Historical Society and throughout the community. Then, over here, we have Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kettles. Now, Kettles actually won the Medal of Honor during his time in Vietnam. He ended up going back to save about 8 troops after an evacuation took place, and 8 troops were not able to make it back during the mass evacuation. Now, during this time, he ended up going against orders, and it actually costed him a bill for the helicopter. However, under Barack Obama's presidency, he ended up getting the Medal of Honor about 50 years later. Moving on, we have some different notable physicians in Ypsilanti. In the top right corner is Dr. Helen McAndrew. Now, Dr. Helen McAndrew was one of the first female doctors here in Ypsilanti, and she moved here in 1850 from Scotland with her husband. She lived in one of 2 octagon houses here in Ypsilanti. Unfortunately, her house has since burned down. And she also focused on an unorthodox way of treatment. What she ended up believing in was fresh air and movement and nature would really help remedy a lot of illnesses. She also participated largely in the Underground Railroad with her husband, and she actually taught escaped slaves to read. Right here, we have some of those books that she used to help slaves read, and we also have her medicine bag here. Underneath there, we have a bunch of different Ypsilanti hospitals that have existed throughout Ypsilanti's existence. Now I want to avert your gaze up top here really quick to this portrait of Demetrius Ypsilanti. Now this is where Ypsilanti gets its name. It's from Demetrius Ypsilanti. Now he was a Greek general during the country's independence from the Ottoman Empire, which began in 1821. And Ypsilanti was founded in 1823. Underneath him, we have different businesses in Ypsilanti. At one point, Ypsilanti had an underwear factory, which employed about 300 people at one time. It might be hard to see, but there is a lady painted in her underwear on the side of the building, which at the time was very scandalous. But it was also right on the railroad tracks. So, for that reason, it became very popular because free advertising. Underneath here, you might be able to see, we have a sign for Mellencamp's, which was the clothing store here in Ypsilanti. This is where you would get all your typical clothing, but also your Ypsilanti High School varsity jacket, any Boy Scout equipment you might need, and anything else you could think of. This was the store to go for clothing. We also have different mineral salt bottles here. Now this was very popular here in Ypsilanti before 1914, and it was kind of one of those things where you bathe in it and it would be able to heal you of any illness. At one point, it was actually shipped all across America. Further down the case here, we have notable African Americans in Ypsilanti's history. I always like to point out Elijah McCoy. His parents were escaped slaves, and he ended up studying engineering in Scotland. He later moved to Ypsilanti at one point and had invented the lubricating cup. Now, a lot of people tried to steal his design. Even Henry Ford created his own lubricating cup based off of Elijah McCoy's design. However, every other lubricating cup, which was typically at the time used to oil train gears, they were not as good as Elijah McCoy's. That's where the saying, "the real McCoy" comes from. He later moved to Detroit, but he did live here in Ypsilanti at one point. A few other notable African Americans I'd like to point out as well is John Burton, who was the first African American mayor here in Ypsilanti in 1967 to 1968, and then Floyd B. Walls, who was the first African American firefighter here in Ypsilanti in 1966. In that far case over there, we have some Underground Railroad stuff. Ypsilanti actually took a big role in the Underground Railroad. That little map in the center there is some different houses that all took part in the Underground Railroad, but our most important figure is Asher Ray. Now it might be a little hard to see his photo from there, but we do have photos of him on our Internet Archives. Now Asher Ray, he was technically mixed, but he had a very white appearance. He lived on a farm here in Getty's Road, which was very close to Michigan Avenue. So what he would do is he would take escaped slaves from his farm down Michigan Avenue underneath a false bottom in his carriage with produce on top, from Michigan Avenue all the way into Detroit, and from Detroit right across the river into Canada. Everything you see in that case is mostly from his family as well. Moving on, we're here at our Willow Run case. Now, Willow Run was built by Henry Ford, and you can see it has a very L-shaped appearance. The reason for this is if it was straight, it would have went from Washtenaw County, where Ypsilanti is located, and gone into Wayne County. Now, Wayne County was going to charge the Ford Company tax per plane that was produced, and they created the B-24 bombers. Now, thanks to Henry Ford's assembly line and Rosie's the riveters, they were able to create one plane every hour off the assembly line. After the war, General Motors bought it, where they built the Fraser and the Kaiser, and then later produced transmission. Center case here on the other side is more Native American artifacts. Then, if you look above those two cases over there, you can see a large blown up image of the Tucker torpedo. We also have some models down here. Now, the Tucker torpedo was created by Preston Tucker, and this is him over here with his family. The Tucker torpedo was supposed to be a mix of luxury and sports car combined together. Another unique thing about the Tucker torpedo too is that the engine was actually in a modern day trunk, and the trunk was where the hood is. It also had 3 headlights, and the center headlight would turn depending on which way you turn the steering wheel. There's only 50 ever produced in pre-production, and he unfortunately was plagued with a lawsuit where he was unable to make any more. This last case in this room here is our Civil War case. Everything you see here is sometime between 1845 to the start of the Civil War, 1861, until about 1865. Up top, we have a saddle, which is 1845 for horses that was used during the Civil War. We also have bullets, buttons, medals, sabers, guns. We also have our 3rd Medal of Honor Award winner here, Brigadier General Byron Cutchinson, for his heroic leadership during an important battle in the Civil War. We also have some different discharge papers and release papers for Ethan E. Trim, who was a Ypsilantian native during the Civil War as well, and he was captured by the Confederacy in 1864. This is the Heritage Room. It serves as a second entrance over here to the Ypsilanti Historical Society's museum. Over here, we currently have a little lines display. At one point last year, this actually served as a time capsule display for Ypsilanti's bicentennial, 200-year anniversary. This case over here, we have a bunch of different Ypsilanti-related postcards. And over there, we actually have a parlor organ that had its interiors redone in 1972. The original organ itself was built in 1907. Welcome to our library. First off, we have this wonderful stained glass window here. Now this was commissioned for the Ladies' Library, which is a few buildings away from us here in Ypsilanti. Now it was commissioned by a lady named Mary Ann Starkweather, who donated a lot of money to this area and surrounding areas as well for different renovations, building constructions, and wonderful stuff like this. Now this original one set at the Ladies' Library, and there's two other as well in Ypsilanti, one in the Presbyterian Church and one in Highland Cemetery Starkweather Chapel. Now, this particular one was made in the late 1880s, and it was later moved over here when this building was being converted into a museum because kids were throwing stained glass windows at that abandoned property. It is now currently privately owned, and we currently house the Tiffany stained glass window. We also have, in the center, in this case over here, different African Americans in Ypsilanti's current past. Now this is different from that African American case in the Edmonds room. This one here mostly focuses on a few different characters, but mostly religion, especially that of Brown Chapel. Now Brown Chapel started here in one person's house as an African American church for African Americans. It has currently been relocated since that house into a beautiful site today. They have had a strong, profound impact on the community and is very popular here in Ypsilanti. We also have over here another one of the fireplaces that were located in the parlor room. This is our solarium. It's connected here to the library and the informal parlor. And as you can see when you look around, there's a lot of light that comes into this room. If you look above you, you also have a hatch that you could open to let even more direct sunlight in. Some of these plants are over 50 years old, and some of them are rather new. Welcome to our city room. We currently have this set up as a 1920s parlor, which is something we just recently did following the Christmas season. Now around this room, you'll see the wonderful detailing mentioned in the parlor. You'll also see some magazines, typewriter, camera, a different telephone than our hand crank telephone in the kitchen. This painting here is actually very interesting. This is one I always like to point out to people. This girl here is Haiti Dougal. Now, she may look like a girl, but she actually has a rather interesting story I'd like to share. Now, Miss Dougal here actually died when she was 14 years old, but they already started this portrait, and they got all the way up except for the face completed. So her grandfather, which has a very similar looking appearance to her, actually stepped in for the rest of the picture. So it's a 14-year-old girl's body, clothing, etc., and a 70-year-old face. Creepy. Over here, we have a radio. We also have a Victrola. Now, one other quick thing I'd like to mention in this room as well is these two windows here. Now, these two windows here actually lift up, and that's how you get out to the porch out front. There's no other staircase to get out there. The only way to get in and out is through these windows right here. Welcome to the second floor of the museum. Over here, we have a variety of different printing stamps from Standard Printing, which at one point was a printing shop located here in Ypsilanti. They are still around currently doing digital printing, but at one point they used to use printing stamps like this to create different prints. Welcome to the second floor bedroom. This room here gives you an idea of what a bedroom may have looked like sometime between the 1860s when this house was built and the 1920s before it became an apartment. We have one large bed right here in the center, and then a baby crib over here, along with a baby bathtub to pair with it. We were kind of envisioning this room to be maybe one of the eldest daughter or something like that that'd be able to take care of the child as well as doing her daily chores. We also have a couple of chamber pots along the room as well. If you look over here to this fireplace, you'll notice that this one over here is actually a wood burning fireplace compared to the coal burning fireplaces downstairs. There's 3 of them total on the second floor here. We also have some hat pins and perfume bottles as well. And then on the walls here, we actually have 2 samples which were both done in 1834. Moving further down the hallway here, we actually have a taxidermy collection that was done in 1856. Then we also have a variety of different inkwells here in this wonderful case. Even though some of them don't look like inkwells to me personally, I can assure you they are all in fact inkwells, all from the Mary Baker collection. Welcome to our crafting room. Here in the middle, as you can see, we have two different spinning wheels. The larger wheel there was used for wool to convert it into yarn, and the smaller wheel here was used for flax material. Around the room as well, we also have various different quilts, some of which go back as early as 1860. Also scattered around the room as well, we have a various number of sewing machines. We have the most popular one of all time, the Singer sewing machines, but we also have a few others as well. Now this case over here is actually a bunch of lace and design work here, all done by Kathleen Campbell, who's been a long-time volunteer here at the Ypsilanti Historical Society. We also have another one of those wooden fireplaces I was talking about as well. We are now moving towards the back of the house here. Before we move into the costume room here and the music room on my other side, I want you to take a look at this case right here. Now this case has a bunch of different photographs from Eastern Michigan University and Cleary College. Now Eastern Michigan University is the popular university located here in Ypsilanti. At one point in its founding in 1849, it started off as a teacher's college. Now it is just a regular university that is home to the equals. Cleary College, which is above the photographs of Eastern Michigan University, was established in 1883 here in Ypsilanti as well, and it started as a business college. We are now moving into the costume room. As you can see when you look around this room here, we have different hat boxes scattered across the top here. And we also have 5 different cases, 2 on this side, 3 on the other. This first case here is to highlight some different individual sewing techniques on this jacket here, as well as some different sewing items that would be used. Then, on the far case over there, we have a woman going out to afternoon tea. On this other side here, we have 3 cases as well. So on this case here, closest to the wall, we have a representation of the Interurban Trade Station uniform. Now the trains used to be a very vital role here in Ypsilanti. Down in Depot Town, the trains would often stop as a passenger train and also a supply train. At one point, we actually had a barracks here for the Civil War because the train stopped here so often. Now, this uniform is one very similar that someone conducting a train would have used. But we also had a trolley system that went from Ypsilanti to Ann Arbor, and they would have worn a similar outfit there as well. To the case to the left of that, we have some different women's bloomers, bustles, girdles, the real painful looking stuff that women would typically wear to make themselves look pretty. Obviously, today that is not needed at all. But at the time when these things were created, it was pretty typical for women to wear that type of stuff. And in this far case here, we also have some tobacco boxes and some boots underneath those. Welcome to our music room. As you look around the room here, it's a rather small room compared to the costume room, and we have a lot of different objects here in this room. Let's start with this case over here. Over here, we have a bunch of different musical instruments up top, and underneath we have some that were used at the Ypsilanti High School. We have the John F. Barnhill Ypsilanti Memorial Band, which is what the Ypsilanti High School Marching Band was named after, John F. Barnhill, who founded the program. In the middle here, you also see a parlor organ. Now going with the marching band, in this back wall here, we have the Ypsilanti High School Boys Marching Band uniform from 1935 to 1955. And then we also have an Ypsilanti High School Girls Drum and Bugle Corps outfit from 1935 to 1937. Now, at the time of the creation of the marching band and the bugle corps, women and men were not allowed to be mixed for whatever reason, so they had to have their own separate marching bands. Over here, we have some stereopticons and stereoscopes. Now, these take two contrasting images of one image, and when you look through them, you actually get a 3D image. All of these over here are all Ypsilanti related as well. For instance, I'm going to pick this one up and show you closer to the screen. This is State Normal College in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And on the back, they all also have extra information about what photo you're looking at. Welcome to our tour room, located at the back of the house. I always like to say when I'm giving a tour that if you're ever looking for a tool, the Ypsilanti Historical Society probably has it. Although, it might just not be modern. So if you're okay using a hand drill and you need something, we got you covered. Right here we have a wonderful carpenter box that has a lot of different tools that a carpenter would have used back in the day. It might be a little hard to tell, but if you look real closely, you can see different images of different family members and friends that this particular carpenter had installed in his box. So that way he was always with his friends and family. When you're going around the room as well, in the back by the window, we have a corn shucker. The corn shucker would be used to get the husks off the corn. You crank the handle there on the right side of it, and out pops the corn. We also have different wood planers, irons, lanterns, farming equipment. Over here we have an early vacuum that was used. This was a hand crank vacuum. We also have rug beaters and bells as well. Welcome to Betty's room. This room is currently set up as an 1890s Christmas parlor. This was also done by Eastern Michigan University's Preservation Studies graduate program. They took elements from our last exhibit here, which was a toy exhibit, and re-implemented it into this immersive exhibit, which is what you see it as now. They also restored our doll collection in acid-free boxes and acid-free tissue paper, and added different dolls throughout the exhibit as well. As you take a look around the room, you'll see over here we have some toys scattered throughout the room and on the floor. We also have a little Christmas tree with some presents underneath. We also have some books that may have been around in the 1890s, and we have a little tea set over here. And that concludes our tour. Thank you very much for visiting the Ypsilanti Historical Museum and joining us today on our 360 video tour. If you're interested in hearing more stories about Ypsilanti's past and present, you can become a member for only $20 a year, and that gives you 4 issues to our Gleanings. The Gleanings is our quarterly magazine sent to members that has different stories about Ypsilanti's past, what's happening in the museum, and possible upcoming events. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email yhs.museum@gmail.com. Thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.